Super Smash Bros Ultimate is looking good. Like really good. This looks like it's one of those games that defines a system and what all of its other games were about. Never has such an all-star series with an all-star cast gotten this much of an improvement in a gap of one game. All these characters, stages, modes, you can play them anywhere with anyone. Everyone is excited about all the little things that they talked about. Just about every small detail gives people another hour of speculation. Well, everyone's just gonna speculate endlessly on what characters we're gonna see and just leaving it at that, as they all do. I myself remember Nintendo showing off the menu screen for the game in this mysterious covered up mode. Apparently most people think it's Smash Tour 2 Bongo Mania, and they have all the right to think that such an innovative experience would be added into the Super Smash Bros franchise, but I like to think differently. You see, back in a little game I like to call Super Smash Bros Brawl for the Nintendo Wii, which most of you remember for
I'm pissed off!
Nintendo decided to extend the adventure mode from Super Smash Bros Melee into a full 8-hour story mode known as the Subspace Emissary. Not a lot of people have actually heard of this mode, and it's not a surprise, but personally I think there's a lot more that's special to this mode that I want to talk about, as well as to why it should return for future games. The foundation of Super Smash Bros.'s gameplay consists of you choosing from a roster of characters and using their moves in order to send your opponents off the screen. That formula has been implemented all 5 times across the series, and it's slowly changed itself to make it more fit as a party game. But since it's filling in that role, would the formula work for a single player adventure? Would combo moves and chain grabs really translate well into story and character on their own? The truth is that if you're gonna have a game that is both multiplayer and single player, then of course you're gonna need tweaks to go from one to the other. But then why would you go through the hassle of just making a story mode anyways if you can just make really bad multiplayer?
Look how hip and cool we are!
Well, back in the planning stages of Brawl, since they were adding so many characters, he felt things were getting cluttered and wanted a way to capitalize on the game's large roster, and so he came up with the idea of a story mode. The plan was to have every character in the game show up to some extent and do something to forward the story, and you know what that gives us?
You're crazy!
On the gameplay side, well, the massive samurai dude apparently directed Kirby, a series of games that Smash takes many traits from, specifically gameplay. The things that are unique to Smash though are easy to account. So in Smash, the objective is to get sent off the screen by building up the percentage of your opponent, which is how things work in the story mode. And since Smash is about the variety of different characters and trying them all out, every time you die you spawn in as a different character. In fact, there's a row to the left of the screen that decides the character order which you get to pick before every level. So the main idea of fighting with different characters is already transformed into a story mode pretty well. Not to mention, since most characters are varied, it makes me want to try them all out since there's no one I really hate playing. So the transition from multiplayer to single player is all figured out, which is already a great achievement for a multiplayer centric game. Transforming the gameplay into something suited for what you could call an entirely different style is a feat that's really hard to pull off that most games aren't capable of doing, so it's good that they got the gameplay down. But there's one thing I have to cover before I talk about this game.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
Enough! All that hard work.
Now about the actual story itself. How do I put this? The story sucks. If you try to analyze what the meaning of all this is, just know that this was written by the same dude who wrote Kingdom Hearts. That is not a joke. That is real. But that's not what people are going to care about. It's the action that we see in these cutscenes, you know, what the characters do and how they interact. Imagine just being able to play a game where the most memorable video game characters of all time work together and fight each other in the epic cutscenes in order to save the world from being destroyed. Imagine that. Just, wouldn't that be cool? Listen, you could be 7 years old and already be excited that this is a thing. There's a special impact to everything that occurs in Subspace since you know these characters from fond gaming memories. But what's interesting about the story is that if we were to say that Nintendo's games are somehow connected in one big universe or something, then what we see here is the in-between of the Nintendo world. The places you actually go to in this game aren't even Nintendo locations, they're their own thing. And every enemy you see here is also completely original.
Oh, son of a bitch!
In fact, besides the characters, everything here is brand new, which actually kind of intimidates you as to what's to come. And I mean, it may seem like kind of a spike to see such weird, bizarre monstrosities live in the same world as Jigglypuff, but if you have played the games these characters originate from, then it makes all the more joyful to see what they're gonna do to overcome these challenges. No one is out of character, everyone is doing what they should be doing. Sometimes what they did with them is something I wouldn't think they would have done in 1,000 years.
You want to explain to me what you're doing here?
But by far the best moment that explains the threat and awe of Subspace's story is Taboo. This guy shows up right at the very end of the game and is revealed to be the one pulling all the strings, and also to be the one who is literally bombing the entire world of Smash Bros. What can he do?
You should have gone for the head.
The reason I'm getting the story mode out of the way first is because, well, to some, that's all there is to this mode on the outside. But looking deeper into the inside of the gameplay proves that this adventure has much more to cover. And I know that the number of people who thought more about the gameplay instead of the story amounts to fucking no one! But I don't really give a shit because that only makes more space for me to talk about this in depth. Alright, so I explained the basic mechanics already and how they adapted into a single player adventure, but how about, well, everything else in the game? Well, let's start with progression. Progression is really important in any game because you need it in order to keep a player wanting to play your game. And it's not about just rewarding people in order to keep them playing. It's about delivering the gameplay bits into perfect parts so people could either binge it or play it in small sessions. And if you're a game with a lot of content, you're gonna need to deliver that in the perfect slices. Super Mario Odyssey does this really well. You can either go on a moon hunting rampage, or you could very quickly hop in and collect 2 to 3 moons at a time. This simple nature of slow but steady progress keeps you hooked to do the missions. And while you could say that moons don't carry enough value, well, it's more about the journey than the reward, which is how it usually is in most games. You play them because the journey to the goal is fun, and it's unique and varied in Super Mario Odyssey's case. Something like the green stars in Super Mario Galaxy 2 aren't fun. The regular levels in Galaxy 2 are fun because the linear structure goes along with the linear design. The normal stars have a focus on this. There are linear platforming challenges to the end that allow the main mechanics of Galaxy 2 to flourish. But green stars are just objectives tossed to the side necessary for 100% completion. They don't offer new linear design, just a small detour, and due to Galaxy 2's linear nature, collecting them feels like a chore. They don't open up a new way to use the mechanics or power-ups, they're just kinda there. Not only that, but they're opened up to you all at once, so it leaves you kinda aimless as to which level you should pick. So as you can see, Super Mario Odyssey's power moons allow for a diverse, free-form and fun way of pacing your game. It keeps the player interested and keeps you wanting to play, while Super Mario Galaxy 2's green stars are forced, strict, and made 100% completing the game a complete chore. So if the focus of Subspace is to give spotlight to the diverse character roster, then you need to accomplish that over the course of the adventure, which is what they did. Every time you clear a level, a new character is added or brought back into your team. That already gives the game a huge advantage in terms of keeping players interested, since when it comes to pacing, the cutscenes and gameplay work hand in hand. You get excited to see who's going to be the next character to show up and how they impact the story, as well as how they're going to function in-game. Masahiro Samurai specifically chose Brawl's newcomers with their unique movesets in mind. For example, he listed the definitive traits of their character and moveset and basing all of their moves on the simple idle stance. The spacing out of when you get new characters and how different their playstyles are gives you a reason to keep playing to the end. And yeah, I know that you can try most of them out in the versus mode, but Brawl has a marginally large amount of characters that you still need to unlock, so you'll still find some surprises. Some of these characters you even only get to play in the last level, and some you can only unlock after the last level, so that does more for variety. But how about we actually go into the levels themselves, talk about the designs that the levels exhibit. Well, here's where I feel one of the coolest and also worst things of the game is shown. The structure of the levels is linear. You go from one end to the other, fighting enemies, entering hidden rooms to get collectibles, using items to power yourself up, and all that. Now, the inherently good thing about fighting in the story mode is that these enemies are very simple. They don't do a lot to attack you, so fighting them is an exercise of your flexibility in using your character, which means running along the path while on an enemy slaughtering rampage is kinda fun. My problem arises when they add these areas where you're ambushed by them. Don't worry, they aren't awful or anything, but it seems to give off the impression that these were only added to extend the game time. The fluidity and motion you have while you attack enemies on your path is much more restricted here. Most of these come with the reward of a collectible at the end of it, but that doesn't change the fact that it feels like filler. And that's how I feel about most of the level designs. A lot of them are very slow and overall feel like they made these game assets and didn't know where to put them, so yeah, just stick that on there. Of course, the level design has its upsides. Like I previously mentioned, combating the enemies is very fun, specifically when you know how to control that character and what moves to do. It creates a sort of in-depth knowledge of your character and how you adapt a playstyle to them, which is really cool because it makes every character stand out from the rest in their own unique special way as you go learning their moves. There are boss fights in the game too, which I feel actually do the purpose of the enemy rushes better than the actual enemy rushes. The bosses don't suffer from any hit stun, but they are a really big target, so you can just keep wailing on them with all you got. But they are boss fights, which means they pack a punch. So in a way, you and the boss carry an evil level advantage since you have a versatile moveset of the character you play as, and the bosses have the advantage of packing a wallop with every hit. It makes fighting the bosses your own unique experiences, which is why they even branded it off into its own separate mode. But as you can see, Subspace's mechanics focus on giving the spotlight to the versatile movesets displayed in each character and using them to distinguish them by basically setting all of them to their own playstyle. This makes Brawl's roster of characters feel like a family to you. You couldn't take anyone away from here, no matter if you hated or loved them. It makes such a huge number feel diverse, and if you want to know the personality of these characters, well, that's what the cutscenes in Subspace are for. All of this plays a part in making the game a memorable classic. And now that Smash Ultimate is putting a big focus on making sure you know everyone's in the game, I'd say you could bet on a more scoped down version of this mode making a comeback. Perhaps they'll make it like the final level of the game, the Great Maze, and that's how you'll unlock the characters. But anyways, if there's one last thing I'll say about Subspace, it's that it should be proud that it tried new things. Brawl was a very experimental game, and while some things came out bad, others came out great, but Subspace always seemed to be tossed aside as, oh yeah, it's those where they're the cool cutscenes that happen or whatever. Just making the character trailers in Smash 4 be of very high quality doesn't replace all the other things Subspace brought along with its inclusion. And while to most people that call this game weird and makes no sense or whatever, to the very big portion of the casual audience that makes up those 13 million sales, to us, this game had something special. It had a story mode that wasn't Smash Tour.